Next fly for the evening is a fly that I'm very excited about. It's a new release, a 2021 release from Umpqua. This is my Balanced Leather Leech. Like I said, I'm very, very excited about this fly. This is a fly I've been fishing for years. Umpqua jumped on board with it, and they're going to be producing it. And actually, as this video comes out on Instagram Live and Facebook and all that, this fly should be available in shops that have it ordered. It's like I said, it's a balanced fly. I'll come right out and say that I did not invent the balanced fly design. That's been around a gentleman by the name of Phil Rowley and Jerry McBride out of Washington and Phil Rowley out of Canada. Jerry McBride was the one that was the first person to put a pin on a bead and jig a fly, and Phil Rowley was the one that kind of popularized it. So that's where the idea of that fly came from. And then on top of that, for many years, I've been playing with ultra suede material. Hairline used to sell it, and that's where I first saw it in the fly shop. I bought it, some black leather or ultra suede, and I would tie leeches for it like crazy. And then all of a sudden, Hairline DQ'd it, and it was unavailable. So for the last couple years, I've been searching for the same material with not a lot of luck until about 2 years ago, I finally found in bulk where I can get this ultra suede material. Ultra suede is a synthetic leather, so it looks and feels like leather, but some of the negatives about leather being when it gets wet, dry, real leather tends to crack and it needs to be treated and all that. Ultra suede does not do that. This fly can get wet and dry however many times you want, longer than the life of the fly, and this will never crack, it'll never rip, it'll never really stretch, it'll never distort. Whatever shape you cut into it will be there. And like I said, I source this in big sheets and strip it myself. And I actually do sell this. This is a plug. I'll go out there and say it. We have this at Charlie's Fly Box. It's the only place where you can get it because I'm the one that buys it, strips it, bags it, gets the correct colors dyed for me. So it's not a material that's super readily available, but you can get it. Just get in touch with me or Charlie's Fly Box, and we can get it for you. Other than that, everything else on this fly is very readily available. It's a super easy fly to tie. The balanced jig idea is if you hang this fly under an indicator, there's your tie off point. The bead is on a pin which is attached to the shank, and under an indicator, the fly is going to hang just like this under the water, completely horizontal. And whatever the indicator is doing above the fly in any sort of wind, if the indicator is going up and down, this fly is going to do that. It's going to up and down. And this ultra suede, when it becomes wet, not so much when it's dry, but when it becomes wet, it saturates with water, and the swimmability of it, the movement in this little leather tail is unbelievable in the water. And being ultra suede, it's super thin. So whether the fly is moving fast or slow, that shape is never going to distort. So a fish can come right up to this and look at it, and that profile is still going to be there. So it's very good combination of the balanced jig foundation with the use of an untraditional material kind of in combination. A very good fly. I can't even tell you how many quality fish me and my friends have caught on this fly as I've been fishing it for the last handful of years, and now it's available. Like I said, by the time this video is out, shops should have it. We just got it into Charlie's right before I came to shoot this video. So it'll be available. If you don't want to tie it, you can buy it. But right now we're going to break down, and I'm going to show you how to tie this fly. First thing in the vise, this is an XT500. 60-degree bend jig hook. I get a lot of questions about where people say, oh, it has to be a 90-degree bend. That's not true at all. It does have to be a jigged hook, but 60 or 90 is fine. This is a 60, and I'll show you today that it doesn't necessarily matter. You can do it on either or. And I'm gonna, the thread is 6/0. I like to use 6/0 on this fly. We're gonna do the peacock one, which I just showed you in the vise. This fly is tied in a couple different colors. I'll show it to you at the end. I won't do it right now. But it will be it's going to be commercially available in a couple colors. The next material we're going to need is a little sequins pin. It just has a small little kind of mushroom head on the end. And I've gone ahead and I do this by the hundreds. I just basically cut them roughly in half or 2/3, so the back end is gone. Just throw all the points away. All you need is the head. And I just throw these in a cup. Next thing we're gonna need on this size 10 is a 3/3 or a 1/8, same thing, 3.3 millimeter tungsten bead. It does truly have to be tungsten. You can use brass, but when you put this on here, the distance between the two starts to get very, very far out to kind of cantilever the bead away from the hook to get it to stay horizontal. So a brass bead are very, very light, and they don't do that well. So again, they have to be very far away. Again, it can be done with a brass bead, but it's much easier with a tungsten bead. And this is the peacock version. Like I said, I'm gonna use a copper bead. Grab this pin if I can off the table. And then I'm gonna take the pin and the bead. I know you probably can't see this on my fingers, but once I get it on the hook, I'm gonna put the bead on the pin, essentially backwards. For all things considered, usually the countersunk end is towards the side of the fly where you're gonna be tying. On here it's backwards, so the countersunk side is to the pin of the bead, or the head of the pin. And then at this point, just put your thread right up where the jig portion of the shank starts. Take this, and we're gonna put this on here. I just throw a couple loose wraps on there to hold it. And now we're gonna basically get our distance correct here. If this is way too close, it's not gonna balance. If it's way too far, it's gonna balance in the wrong direction. So there is a little bit of play in here where this gets placed. So generally what I like to do is about 2 beads widths from the back of the bead to the thread. So this distance here, start at about 2 beads width, if that makes sense. And that's where I placed it. Should be about right. Maybe I'll just pull it just a touch farther. It's a little bit farther than you think in your mind, even with this 1/8 bead. To get it to truly balance, you want it to stick out a little bit. And then I'm actually gonna, I put a lot of pressure on this pin, so I hold the hook actually with my fingers, because if I don't, I'll pull it down. And so I hold this, and I really wrap this on. And then once you got that, you're gonna jump onto the pin, and you're gonna go forward, and you're gonna go back and forth and build a ramp up to that bead. That's gonna lock that bead to that pin. That's the only reason why we're doing that at this point. But again, ramp back and forth until that pin is super nice and tight. And at this point, you're gonna come back, just clean this all up. One thing I will say, I cut these pins with a wire cutter, and when you do that, it gets very sharp right there. So I kind of jump over that point. If you do, just tie and just go right to there. A lot of times you will just cut your thread immediately, because that's very sharp. So I just jump over that for now. We'll cover that up later. But what I'm gonna do is just to show you guys where we're at right now. I'm just gonna throw a quick whip finish on here. I'm gonna grab a piece of tippet. Just to show you what we should be looking at. So, and I would recommend doing this a handful of times before you go full production mode on this fly. So take a piece of tip, it doesn't matter what it is, throw it on there and hang it. And see, now this is so you can, when you first look at this, you're gonna say it's not quite level, it's head heavy. And that's perfect, because you gotta remember, there is going to be a tail that comes off of the back of this. So at this point, with just a hook, pin, and bead, you want this to tilt downwards towards the bead. Again, the tail is gonna counteract that and bring it back level. So at this point, if it's perfectly level, or even worse, if it's tilted this way, you're going further, it's only gonna get worse. If it's level, it's gonna get worse because the tail's gonna force it that way. With nothing on the shank, you want it to be head heavy slightly, not anything crazy down. Just a slight tip to the head is what you're after. And once you have that, and you know the distance with the particular beads, because even though they're all labeled 1/8 or 3.3 mil, they're all different. They all have different amounts of tungsten in them. So play with it. Once in your mind, you can see where you're at. If you do it enough, it just becomes like second nature, and you can just jam these out. At this point, just put the thread back on. Next material is we're gonna jump into this leech leather. I've got some peacock here, and real quick, I'm not gonna do this because I didn't bring a cutting board and all that. So I take this leather, and this comes pre-cut like this in the bag. And then all I do is I take one of these fabric cutters, it's like a little mini pizza roller, cutting board and a straight edge, and I cut this long taper into it. Almost just bring it to a point. It doesn't matter. Just taper it all the way to a point. And at this point, I just take my scissors and I just round this over. I still want it to be pretty pointy at that end, and just give it a little round over, something like that. I just didn't want to bring a big cutting board and do that on camera, but that's how you do it. Fabric cutter, each side, round the point over, you're good to go. And then to measure it, basically I hold it on the top and give myself a solid shank length plus a little bit, and then in my mind, I take into account how much distance I need from the thread to the back of the pin. So we're going to be there, and I switch hands, I cut it just a bit longer, and then we're going to come in and we're going to tie this in so that the leather comes right to the back of the pin. And make sure it just stays right up on top of the shank. Pull it nice and tight, and then you can just basically wrap over it. Something like that. At this point, fold it forward, and I want the leather tail to stick out past the bead. That might be a touch far, but we're going to leave it as is. I'm not going to redo it. It's okay. You just want this tail to be kind of the prominent feature on this fly. So quick and easy way to measure it is just fold it over. As long as it sticks out past the bead. Again, that's a little bit far, but not enough for me to redo this. We're just going to leave that as is. You can see that super nice, real long taper. I mean, the taper almost comes to where it meets the hook shank. Yeah, very good. And then at this point, we're going to put the thread somewhere in the middle, doesn't matter. We're going to switch to some semi-sealed dubbing. This is the peacock color. Each tail, this tail material comes in 6 different colors, and I usually have a semi-seal color that I use to kind of match the tail. Peacock tail, peacock semi-seal. It is color number 16, if anybody is curious. I take a bunch out of the bag. Again, pull and stack. Done this several times. If this is the first fly that is shown in the video, basically take some out of the bag, pull and stack. And to kind of pull out a lot of the twisted up, gnarly fibers. Pull, stack, pull, stack, pull, stack. Do that a dozen times. You're good to go. Put it down on the table. Next thing we're going to do, again, dubbing loop. Pull the thread right at me, put my pointer finger in. All we're going to do is cover this whole shank with the semi-sealed dubbing, so just give yourself enough to do that. So about, I make a dubbing loop of about 8 inches. Pointer finger in, thread back on, throw it over, lock it, wrap it back. Thread up tight to the bead. We're going to take this. Again, pointer finger stays in the loop. I put the dubbing in my left hand. I grab it with my right hand, just the corner of the entire bundle. We're not going to use all of this for this fly. I just, have more than I need. Grab the edge, pull it, just very sparse, put it in the loop. Again, pull, stack, whatever comes out of that loop. As I go down, I rotate the loop up towards me, again, to fight gravity so stuff doesn't want to fall down. We're getting very close to my fingers, so stuff doesn't want to stay in there. But once we get to the end, carefully put your tool in, slide your finger out, and then you'll have something like that. Very sparse. You don't want to overdo this. You could very easily stack too much in. Always err on the side of being too sparse. The one nice thing about this fly is the semi-sealed dubbing gives it a nice little silhouette, but it's not there to produce a big giant fly. It's very sparse. So that's going to be determine how much dubbing is in here. Once you get it in here, pinch, spin. I'm very close to it, so it's not going to take long for that little bit to get tight. Let it go in your fingers. It's going to shoot up. It's going to spin your whole loop. Once this end up here spins a dozen times or so, you're tight. Come in, aggressively rake this out. It should almost look like you don't have enough dubbing in this loop. Not lengthwise, just overall. It just doesn't seem like this is going to coat the shank and be enough dubbing to really make the fly. It's just so sparse. And then we're going to palmer this. So a good way to explain this, we're not going to wrap it super tight. You're not going to jam as many wraps as you can on this fly. And we're also not going to rib it We're just going to one wrap in front of the other, a little bit of a space, and then move to the next. Again, tight, but not crazy tight, and definitely not ribbing. Just enough to cover the shank. When you get to the jig portion, wherever it ends up being, just go over the top, and then just move the thread in front of the eye, and then just keep going. And again, keep folding them back. When I get to about 1 bead's length behind the bead, I do start wrapping this tighter. Build a little bit more at the head and kind of start to pull it tight, stack it kind of on itself, 1 or 2 turns behind the bead. Once you're tight, again, 1, 2, switch hands, pull up, pull down, let that go, fold that back, come in front, half dozen turns or so, pull it tight. It's locked, it's not going anywhere. Little triangle on your scissors, push or pull. 1 or 2 more turns, clean it up, whip finish. Nice tight whip finish, make sure it's nice and seats. Quality. Again, dubbing brush, forward. Always want to rake everything forward to start. And it stands it all up. And you can see we stacked a bunch more right behind the bead, almost none back there. And then once we have it like this, come back. And it's going to create this really, really see-through silhouette that's just going to sparkle in the water. If you just overdub this, it's not going to give you this effect. And regardless of how you do it, you're always going to have some fibers, because this semi-seal, this is a small, this size 10 hook. You'll always have fibers that are going to be too long. This is a long fiber dubber. So all I do is kind of come in and give it a little bit of a haircut just on the long fibers that are just too long for the fly. It's pretty obvious. Just spin it, look at it. You'll see ones that want to stick out in weird angles and or are too long. Just go through and selectively take those out. Don't just give this thing a haircut. That's going to get rid of that kind of silhouette that we worked kind of hard to get into it. So just selectively take out the handful of fibers you don't want. So here's one that's sticking up. Get rid of that one if I can get it. And that's it right there. Very, very simple fly. We'll see what it looks like. Again, I was a little bit tail heavy. We'll see how it affected the balance. You always want to check them at the end too. Like I said, that tail was a little bit long, but we'll see how it looks under balance. Yeah, you can see that tail is a little bit too long, so it's cocked a little bit in the wrong direction, because I knew that going forward, when I folded it forward, it was a little bit long, but I didn't feel like undoing it. So at this point, what you can do is, since it's too long, you can just come in here and modify this a little bit. If you want to get super, super crazy precise, you can cut a little bit of a taper back into this, getting rid of some of the material on the back end of this fly by shortening it just a touch. As I threw my piece of tippet away. You can always rebalance it if the tail is too long. There's nothing you can do if it's too short. But again, you can play with this, and you can see, and there we go. Shorten that tail up just a touch, and she's about perfect. And once this is wet, this dubbing will all kind of show you I can do it with my fingers, but when this fly gets saturated, this semi-seal just all folds back and gives you just a nice, clean silhouette onto that tail. Very, very effective fly. Very simple to tie. Very easy. Once you knock a couple of these out, you can just bang them out quickly. And that's it. Well, real quick, I can show you I've got a bunch here. These are the other 2 colors that are going to be available from Umpqua. This is a leather, or a purple-tailed, black and purple bodied one, so a black and purple with a black bead. I'll leave that one there. And then the other one that's going to be available is black on black, black leather tail, black magic semi-seal with a peak, or with a chartreuse bead. Very, very good color. Hanging this under the indicator, that hot spot on there with that chartreuse bead and that all black. Very, very good. So these are the 3 colors that will be available commercially. After that, it's completely up to you. You can do them in really, really light olives. That's olive ultra suede or olive leech leather. A straight olive semi-seal, you can do them. Here's a black and red one with an Umpqua red radiant bead with black and red semi-seal. Again, the color combos are kind of just, endless. Here's a, well, we'll just stop. There's no point. You could do it any color you want. There's no end into it. Whatever color leech you want, have at it. Good to go. On to the next.